boys and girls, here we have a Blues Junior, the ubiquitous Fender amp. See them everywhere. First thing I noticed, it's got a Euro plug, and that looks stock. So that would suit the same, probably the same tranny. 230, 240 volt. I have to check that that's right. So it should be 240 volts. So I'll check the wiring on that. But the reports were that it was growling, and then it cut out and wouldn't make any noise. The power light was still on. The user changed the EL84s. To no avail, they weren't glowing. So first thing I noticed was there's a lot of stuff going on in this thing. Let me just grab my chopstick, a little pointer. So first thing I noticed was all the mods, all the change parts, arbitrarily changed capacitors. So that's not stock. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. I think I got all of them. 16 caps. Just arbitrarily changed. Most of them the same value, some are not. They're supposed to be flyback diodes, and now they're caps. Not sure what the story is there. Maybe they were trying to stop oscillation. I don't know. There's 2 missing screws. One there, and there was a screw just floating around in the chassis. Now, this one here is the bias cap. That's supposed to be 100 mic, which is already too big. 100 mic, 25 volts. Yeah, 25 volt in the stock circuit. It's got a 220 mic there, 50 volt. And the thing's moving like too easily. I can tell that the pads have lifted underneath, so it's probably lost a bias supply. It's probably cut the tray, so it's probably lost bias supply, but at very least it's lost any sort of ripple filtering on the bias supply. These things, they're the bipolar supply filter caps. That's stupid. Like, axial caps are harder to get than radial these days. There's no excuse for using them where you should be using radial. They're flopping around in the breeze. They've got tacked on leads. And they're so tall that they're shorting out. So you can see there, poking out past the chassis, and what's on the inside of the lid? Foil that's grounded. So whoever did this probably thought, oh, it's okay, it's on the negative, you know, there's no voltage there, that's just ground anyway. Well, no, it's a bipolar supply. So one of them, what is it, the C32. So the one on the left has got negative voltage on there, on that terminal. So that's shorted to ground. It's probably lost one of the rails. So that means the reverb probably wasn't working either, and the foot switch probably wasn't working. Now they've just arbitrarily changed capacitors left, right, and center. Like they've just replaced this one for no apparent reason. I don't know, like how does the filtering for the foot switch change your tone? Maybe they're trying to stop popping. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. Maybe they were just reading forums too much, which is often the case. So yeah, there's all sorts of weird stuff, like they've probably snapped the lead to the plate there, so they just soldered it onto the spade connector, or crimp a proper connector on there. Is, you know, the solder burns as usual on everything where they've missed and melted stuff. So usually the output boards, the valve boards on these things get cooked, but this one's actually in pretty good nick, so I think we'll be able to get away without replacing that one. As for the heaters not working and the valves not lighting up, that could just be that the new valves didn't have as much of the heater exposed on the end of the cathode as they did on the last valve, so they didn't glow as brightly. That's often the case. They are glowing, they're just not as bright as the previous ones. Doesn't mean there's anything wrong with it. But they also came in at a pretty funky angle, so maybe the pins weren't making great connection there on the heater connections, which are at that opposite end that it was angled away from, so that could have been that too. The heater connections appear to be in good nick. The fuse is intact, so I don't think we've got any problems there. I'll check the heater balance resistors. But yeah, it's like stuff like this. There's just arbitrarily changed components. You've got to look into what they did. You've really got to be careful here. You can't miss anything because they could have done some really silly stuff, and you've got to catch that. All the stuff that they've done isn't anything that I do to Blues Juniors. They've left the first filter, first bypass cap, which is 47 mic. I reduced the value to tighten the amp up a bit, so they obviously didn't know about that mod. They've done something to the FET there for the switching the basically the fat switch, foot switch, fat switch, foot switch, and what else was there? Oh, there's jumper there for C10. I think that might be factory. I'm not sure. I've got to look into that. But yeah, so I've got to go over this thing with a fine-tooth comb and then have a look at how much damage there is on the underside, because there's guaranteed to be some damage on the bottom side. Judging by the quality of the work on the top, they probably don't have the right soldering equipment either, so they're probably overheated pads and ripped off the board and all sorts of stuff. So that's sort of going to be the point where I decide how much I charge. Anyway, thanks for watching, champions. We'll hopefully get this one growling again, but in a good way.